All right, we're live, and I'm really excited to introduce you all to today's guest. So, on today's episode, I interview a durability coach whose integrative approach blends movement therapy, neuro-linguistic programming, and pain education to help both women and men get stronger in all aspects of their lives. She's the creator of the Daily Durability Program, a 6-week online course that was designed to help movers of all types injury proof their joints, erase pain, and create resilient bodies while also boosting their performance. She's also the co owner of Kit's Beach Coffee, located in her hometown of Kitsilano, British Columbia. Welcome to the winner circle, Sarah Jamieson.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you on joining and to tell your story. And I think important to everyone's story, whether they know it or not, is their mission statement. All companies have missions, and we as people should really have that North Star to guide us. And I'd love to hear your current mission, Sarah. What is your mission here on this reality plan?
It's a great question. I think, throughout the years and decades of, being in the industry, and then of course being a new mom of a almost 3-year-old in a couple weeks, my mission has shifted, it's adapted, it's grown, it's modified, but the foundation has always been really the same. And that is, my mission is to be the best version of myself that I can be, so that I can build a legacy for my family, so that I can create greater community as well. And I really feel like that's the root of it. It's For me, it's about longevity, obviously, not just in what I do for my career, but the longevity of setting up success for not just myself and my family, but my son and his family. In Indigenous population, especially here in Squamish Nation, is there's like this cultural saying that they're always thinking 7 generations ahead. And I really love that. And I think that is really the root of my embodiment in the world. And this vehicle that is my physical form is just the vehicle for my soul. And I want to make sure that I'm setting up legacy and community and connection for my son and all the generations that come after him when I'm gone and I'm living amongst the trees as energy.
I love that. That's beautiful. Could you tell me a bit more about the Squamish Nation and the Indigenous community, and how they inspire you and what you do?
Well, I think it's, when I was younger, I think going back to even around grade 6, is I remember going to the Museum of Anthropology and seeing totem poles for the first time, and was really, I've always been really spiritually connected to this land. And I'm a settler. I'm a white person, so this is not my land. And especially in Kitsilano, because there's so much energy and there's so much ancient wisdom here. And I just really felt inspired by the culture and just how history and language and lineage is told through storytelling. It's passed down from elders, and my family's upbringing doesn't have any of that. I think if you're part of the colonization group, it's a very different rooted system. And the Squamish culture is just so deeply connected to land, to preserving it, to integrating this energetic and elemental component to every aspect of their life, their culture, and their living. And ancestral roots and elder wisdom is such a huge part of that. Ritual is such a huge part of that. And it's a very progressive and slow nurturing culture. And that's what I just absolutely love about it. And it's, I've been in and out of study in different types of Indigenous workings and teachings. The Squamish Nation is doing a lot of work in that right now, which I've been really deep diving into. And it's just something that just hits my heart and my soul.
Great, and we're going to do some storytelling, hearing about your story shortly. But first, let's just get an idea of what your life looks like right now. And I know you mentioned a little bit about it at the start, but let's just preface this with so this podcast is called Welcome to the Winner Circle. And the idea behind that is we could all be winners. Often people in society put others on pedestals because they're not willing to do the work themselves. But if you believe, you can achieve. So this was inspired by a course I did about 4 years ago, Go for Your Win, where I learned that the main idea that I learned is, in a destination-oriented society, when I get this job, when I get this career, when I get this degree, it's really the process, the journey, where all the sweetness lies. So that's what going for your win means to me, enjoying the process. What does going for your win mean to you, Sarah? And what does going for your win look like for you today?
Oh, that's a big question, man. It's interesting. I think, going for my win has shifted dramatically since becoming a parent, because going for a win as a single person owning a business, the win was really rooted in still all of my mission and my foundation, but it was about how many people can I impact, how many people can I educate and support and facilitate through moving without pain. That's always been a big part of my world, is how can I help people heal and recover and move better so that they can continue to enjoy what they love. Moving into parenthood has actually been taking a step back, and winning for me is actually embodying that more myself, because I had such a hard pregnancy, hard delivery. And the first 3 years is a complete whirlwind. There's no manual for having a child. And all of a sudden you're responsible for this beautiful being that we worked really hard to bring into the world. We had multiple miscarriages over a couple of years, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to conceive. And then we conceived naturally, and we had this beautiful rainbow baby, 46 hours of labor, firing it onto the planet, and then going, oh my God, it's not about me anymore. It's about something so much larger. And so my win every day is to make sure that I'm not a martyr to motherhood, that I set myself up successfully by making sure I take care of myself day to day, so that he sees that. And my son sees that his mother is a career woman, that his mother is a wife, a friend, all of these things. But it's not rooted in this martyrdom that I think, especially in parenthood, it's very easy to do that. It's very, very easy to just all of a sudden miss 18 years of your life trying to be a good parent, when being a good parent is very subjective. But for me, that win is waking up every day and making sure that his emotional needs are well taken care of, that it's in a sensory rich environment where he's learning, and I'm taking a step back to actually slow down, because I've been such a person of endurance for most of my life, and that has served a purpose, but it no longer actually serves me now as a parent. And my business has changed because of that, for the better.
Mm-hmm. And could you describe your business to the audience that aren't familiar with what that is?
For sure. So I own and operate a coaching and consulting company here out of Vancouver called Moveolution. And the concept is really the evolution of movement. I have an online platform as well. I've developed a couple different products for people to be able to start their journey towards improving mobility, reducing pain through the lens of gentle application. My shtick is really all about pain-free movement, and applying that to life as well as to sport. And the big caveat is pain education. One of the big gaps in our industry, primarily because of the fact that as trainers, coaches, and movement professionals, we're not taught how to diagnose pain. We don't diagnose pain, we don't treat it. We also don't diagnose or treat trauma. And yet 90% of the population is dealing with persistent aches and pains. So if we're not taught how to move around that, how to modify, adapt, how to screen, how to explain and create language that's supportive, that to me, that's what I like to do. Is I like to take all of that and package it up in a way that can then bridge those gaps, so that when a client comes forward and does have pain or has something that may need to be looked at a little more closely, trainers, coaches, and movement professionals have the tools to be able to do that, because pain is such a huge barrier to health, and it makes it such a huge barrier to effective training as well.
Mm-hmm. What are the most common barriers that you see? Like you mentioned pain, and also in terms of movement. So what are the common things you're seeing from the general population that needs to be corrected?
Oh, great question. So there's this concept of the big three that I always like to use. In pain research and in pain studies, what we're seeing is basically the top three are low back, like low back pain. 80% of the population will or have some form of low back pain in their life, neck pain as well, and then shoulder pain. So those are the top three, and shoulders are almost at the same degree as lower back. Now, how that relates to general population is the big three that we're seeing generally is more people can use more mobility in their spine and primarily their thoracic spine. Number two is that most people can use some form of hip mobility. Everyone's going to be like, yeah, tell me something new. And then the third one is that most people can use more shoulder stability. So how that relates is if we take those two kind of pain and general population and mash them together, the reason why these things are as they are is that we're living in a more sedentary lifestyle. We are spending, I believe the last statistic is close to 13 to 16 hours in front of a screen. So whether it be your phone or a computer, we are now working more remote. I think it's in the US, MIT did a study of 34% of people are still working remotely. They're not going into an office. So we're dealing with like non-ergonomic workstations, poor postural habits, stress, trauma, all of these things, a pandemic, all of these things that are coming together. And so when we look at pain and then also general population in regards to movement, we're not moving well. 77% of the population doesn't meet physical literacy standards, and that starts in high school. So it's not just this generation, it's the generation that's coming up and the generation that, just came up. All of these things are really leading to many different types of movement compensations and different aches and pains. And pain is very subjective and it's abstract, so it's going to show up differently for every person, and it's going to feel differently to every person. But those are the main statistics that we're seeing.
Okay, and other than getting your 6-week course, which I took a part in, I highly recommend it, and it's available at moveolution.com. Aside from taking part in your program, what are some simple steps that this general population can do to start taking steps forward to minimizing their pain and improving their movement?
For sure. So the big one is just moving more, right? Now, I know that's a bit of like a broad statement, but the way that I like to look at it is, what are the barriers that most people have when it comes to actually moving more? Well, it usually means they're in some form of a rigid structure of a schedule. Most people don't want to go to the gym to do more stuff. A lot of people don't like to exercise as well, so they don't want to go to a gym. So one of the things that I always suggest is, and this will sound familiar because you would have heard in the durability cert, but the bookends of the day, right? People can control morning and evening, right? So when I've looked at surveying hundreds of people of when is the best time of day, what's the number, like what is the sweet spot? 1% of your day, which is 15 minutes, is the one that came back as I can do 15 minutes. 10 minutes is it's not enough, and 20 minutes is too long. So 15 minutes a day, if you move every single joint, every single day in some capacity, you will clean up a lot of things. Now, does that mean you're going to eliminate pain? No. We as coaches and trainers, we're not here to eliminate it. We're here to reduce it, because pain is super complex, especially when it goes undiagnosed and it's been around for a while. But if you move for 15 minutes every single day, every single joint segmentally, especially the spine, because if you can't move the spine, it's really hard to move outside of that. And you connect that with breath. Breathing is a huge part of movement compensation, and also just stress and all of those things. So breath, movement, and move every joint every single day is the easiest point of entry. And that can be in any capacity.
And undoubtedly, this is part of your self-care routine on a daily basis. And as an entrepreneur and a mother, you're very busy. And I know your self-care routine entails then more than just that. So let's go over that now. How do you attend to your self-care mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all around?
For sure.
Practices.
Most of it takes place like all over the day. Right? I'd love to be the person that says, my kid lets me have 30 minutes in the morning, to do the movement, to do all the things I'd like to do, but it generally doesn't happen. He gets up early. My husband, because I'm really good with not having a lot of sleep, and my husband likes sleep. He's a much better human when he has sleep. lovely man. So I let him sleep in. And even if it's for 20 or 30 minutes, but my son gets up very early. So part of our self-care routine is my son and I is I will do some stretching because he loves to sit on me when I'm doing my rolling pattern. I'm doing kind of my ground-based stuff, my breathing. And so I put on, you know, some music that I find is just, for me, emotionally stimulating. Today was native flutes and singing bowls. Yesterday was Jack Johnson. So we get up in the morning and we have some time to ourselves. I play with him, and then my husband will kind of switch off. And then that's usually the time that I get to do whatever I need. And it changes daily. One of the things that I've really worked hard with over the past 3 years has actually been moving out of a rigid structure. Because with training, you know, you train clients at 6 all the way through until 6 p.m. It's bam, 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 bam. And then you get home and you got a meal prep and you do all the things you have to do. As a mother, all of those things still happen, but not in the same capacity. And I'm not obviously training at the same capacity I was. So for me, it's really about more flexibility and freedom. So I sit down, and one of the things that I do is I ask myself, what do you need today, Sarah? Like, what do you need? And I speak to all of the Sarahs that have come and gone, my 6-year-old, my 14-year-old, my 40-year-old, all the Sarahs, what do you need today so that you can feel centered and balanced? And sometimes that's, I'm actually going to go back to bed and just lie down and listen to a podcast. Sometimes that's, I'm going to go out for a run like I did this morning. It wasn't too cold, so I was like, sweet, I'm going to take advantage of that. Sometimes it's a yoga session, and sometimes it's nothing at all. Sometimes it's just like, I need silence. I need like silence and nobody sitting on my face when I'm trying to do my stretches. And that's just it. And then another big part of that is every single day we get out in nature. We live half a block from the beach in Kitsilano. So we are at the beach and in the trails in nature. And that's, for me, that's where I feel most at home. If I can get grounded and I can be amongst the trees and all of those things, as fluffy as it sounds, like that is for me, my spirituality. Because spirituality isn't out there, it's in here. So it's what makes you feel spiritual.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned talking to the different Sarahs. I think that's really interesting and important. Could you maybe explain that to the listener that doesn't understand? Like, how can you talk to the 6-year-old self, like the different age selves? I think it's a very healthy practice. And if you could just get into that.
Yeah, for me, it's inner child work. So yeah. I have, my 6-year-old self, when we think about shifting points or pivoting points in life, is for me, most of my past narratives or things that don't serve me anymore, things like control, rigid structure, repressed emotion happened for me at a very young age. And it happened through being exposed to physical abuse and sexual assault. And so for me at the age 6, that's when those fight or flight moments started coming into play. And they were survival, and they were there for a very, good reason. And that lasted up to the 14-year-old where my parents were divorced when I was 3. And my father is an amazing, amazing human. He's my rock. But my mom married a man at the age of 6 that was not very nice. And neither of us knew that until after the marriage. And he was very abusive to both of us. And so for me, those years were huge. And then they got divorced when I was 14. And my mom at that point was so far down into bipolar disease and addiction to alcohol that, I had to get a couple jobs in high school. And so the 14-year-old was the parent. My mom she passed away in 2008, but she's a beautiful, beautiful woman, did everything that she could possibly do and taught me a lot of valuable lessons. But that 14-year-old was the 6-year-old and the 14-year-old have been running my ship for so long. And it wasn't actually until I had Leo where I realized that most of that past narratives, the stories, the chapters that we have in the story of our life play a role. And if we can sit back and talk to, our former selves, because the 6-year-old's still here, the 14-year-old's still here, the 28-year-old that lost her mother is still here. All of the Sarahs are still communing together, and we're learning from each other. And so a large part of my work over the last 3 years has been healing that inner child and healing that 6-year-old and 14-year-old that may have not had an opportunity to be a child and be an adolescent in the same way that, other people do. Because for my son, who is 3, I want him to have everything that he needs. I want him to be emotionally really resilient as he continues to grow. And so that means I have to continue to do my inner work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lifelong process.
Oh, absolutely. So for someone that this hits a chord, where could they begin this journey? How could they turn inward and start this process?
Therapy is amazing. So honestly, I have been in some form of therapy since I was 14. But what I will say is the individual that I'm working with now, it depends on your belief systems as well. She's an astrologer. She does birth charting. She's a channeler as well. So, she does have all the clairvoyance. She listens to guides. She's an integrative coach. She actually comes from a cognitive behavioral therapy background for kids, has worked with the UN and the Dalai Lama. The woman is just amazing. And the integration of all of those things is what's helped me so much, and really understanding, spending time with yourself, slowing down, reflecting on your life, and, asking yourself the big questions. Those are all great, great starting points. But a big part of it is, for me, I had taken my self-care and my self-therapy, we'll call it, as far as I could. I couldn't go any further because it's kind of like a coach. Coaches need coaches, right?
Yeah.
Taken it as far as I could on my own and needed help with really understanding, what are the missing links. I have a background in neuro-linguistic programming as well, which is basically the neurology of the brain, behavioral patterns, why we choose certain decisions. And a lot of it is creating visualization, imagery, and really looking at how we use language. And so for working with this particular person, she's very much into language and NLP, and that's a lot of her background as well, which helps me because we can connect on that kind of a level. But to go back to your question of where can you start, I think a lot of it is, it all comes down to the difference between soul and ego. The ego is always driving the car, where the ego or the soul's in the back seat being like, hey, you're just a vessel for the work here. And, depending on your philosophies, I truly believe that when you were born into this world, the soul comes with all of the information that you need. It has all of what you're supposed to learn in this lifetime, if you're willing to take a step back and look at that and actually process and be part of that process for your entire life. It comes back with past lessons you didn't learn in past lives. So if we look at it that way, the more time we actually spend in silence and with ourselves, and try to take the ego out of the equation, allows us to actually start uncovering a lot of the things that maybe we haven't dealt with, haven't wanted to deal with, and also understanding that those things no longer serve us and they no longer need to be in our life. So if we can start to collapse those patterns and behaviors, then we can start to see a much better alignment with where we are in the world. And it's literally like taking a weight off. It really is, because you're just shedding old skin you no longer need.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a moment now to celebrate. I feel one thing people don't do enough is celebrate their successes, celebrate their wins. So let's speak about some of your biggest wins to date, Sarah, and what are some accomplishments you are most proud of?
Oh man. I would say it's just funny because one of my narratives have always been I've always been super humble. I've never wanted to talk about the wins and the things that I've done, which is funny. I think it's just a weird thing for a lot of people. I think, we do these great feats and then we're like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. One of the things that I did that I'm very proud of is I was never an athlete in high school. I loved playing sports, but I was never really great at them. So I'd make the grades 8, 9, and 10, but never the 11 and 12 teams for basketball and volleyball and track. And then I loved running, but I was slow. So early on after high school, I was 18 or 19, I just started running. I loved the 1500 meter, but I was always the last person to come in. And I realized that I wasn't fast, but I could go far. And so I started running marathons and absolutely love them. I love the fact that you could run and be a winner at the end of it, get a medal, and didn't matter where you placed. And you were just in the pack and everybody was doing it together. And it was great. And so I ran my first marathon when I was 19. And then a couple years later, after like the fourth or fifth, I noticed that marathons were aligning with charities. And they're like, hey, do you want to like, you know, donate to a charity or run for a charity? I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And the charity run started to come out. And then everybody hopped on the bandwagon. And so when I was 25, after running for a few years, I was like, I wonder, it'd be really cool if I could like spend the next 10 years and run for different charities and different marathons and raise $1 million. And I was like, sweet. And I was like, I'm going to call that Run for a Cause. And it was an idea. And so I started a blog and I just started writing about different things I was interested in the community, both locally and then also globally as well. And so for 10 years, I ran every day. 1 year I ran 9,000 kilometers, which was too much. And at the end of it, what I ended up raising was 2 million. And I did a TED talk on it in 2012. And I think I'm the only person that did the TED talk on a treadmill, and talked about the new super humanitarian was every one of us, and that we have the power to either use our sport or use any passion any passion project that we're interested in to not only help us become the best human that we can be, but what we can also do is take the community along with us, and we can create better community and invest financially in our community by doing so. And so the concept was that through that initiative is if people were, this was when we had pennies, were to donate 1 cent per step, then we would have the opportunity to raise basically like $150. And then you ask 10 of your friends and 10 of your friends, and 3 degrees of separation. All of a sudden that 12-minute talk was, we could raise $160,000 right here, right now. Like who wants in? That's how easy it can be. I mean, so for me, that was a huge win, because my mom also passed away halfway through that, which took a 2-year detour of being in a very dark place, just emotionally and not sure what I wanted to do in my world. I wasn't a trainer at the time. I was working in communications and investor relations. And, but at the end of the 10 years, I'd met my husband. He came with me on my very last run in Beirut, Lebanon. We did the Beirut Marathon and it was glorious. I've done 74 kilometers. I've done a bunch of different marathons and ultra marathons I've created here in Vancouver, non-sanctioned, for a company called Care Canada. And because of my work with them, they nominated me for a Queen Jubilee Diamond Award, a medal that's given up to 60,000 Canadians only. So that was pretty cool. So that's a couple, I think one of my biggest wins, because it was also a 10-year process that also created a lot of really hard lessons that I needed to learn. It's a long time. And I think that, you know, I absolutely adored my time, raised that for 57 different organizations, ran all over the world, which is great. And I never managed to get my marathon under 4 hours. 4:11 to 4:45. I'm like, 12-minute pace bunnies. I'm like, yeah, you got this. I'll just follow you up.
Well, that's quite the amazing accomplishment. Nonetheless, 4 hours or whatever. That's so wonderful. What is your advice for runners listening? How did you maintain yourself to do that for 10 years? Ultra marathons, running in Beirut, running all over the place. How did you maintain your body healthy?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't. Like I did and I didn't. There were times where I definitely did. I felt like I did everything right. But the 9,000 kilometers in 1 year was something, I mean, people are like, oh my God, that's great. I'm like, no, that landed me in major surgery. So that actually was the instigator for an autoimmune disorder, because I had pushed my body so much. And that's what I mean when I say like endurance can be really good. It can be both, if we're looking at it from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, you know, the hustle, the grind. At that point in time, I was the warrior. I was the person going into every day with sword drawn. And that was my survival method. Like that's how I was moving around in the world. And unfortunately, what that did is, even though I got as much sleep as I could, I ate really well, I had recovery days, I was doing all of the mobility work and stuff that I promote now, it was just still too much. And I'd overcommitted myself, and I wasn't willing to say, oh, you know what? No, I can't do that. I would always say yes, because I was taught you never say no. You always say yes. So, and so for me, understanding that, and what ended up happening was I started getting a lot of gut issues, fatigue, just all of the things. And then all of a sudden my appendix blew and I had to go in for major surgery. And we were 6 months away from going to Beirut. And so I had to recover very quickly. And I ended up walking the majority of that marathon because I knew I shouldn't be at the marathon physically, but I had committed to it, and it was in Beirut. So my advice to runners would be, don't do that. Don't overcommit. Self-care is a form of resistance. That's an Audre Lorde quote. And I really, now I see that no longer serves me. So I don't ever take anything to that capacity anymore. But for those that want to run marathons, know that your joints and your tissues are going to require a lot more self-care and a lot more recovery. Also, it's not just about the muscles and the tendons, the ligaments, and the joints. It's about what happens under the hood as well. So fuel your body well, drink lots of water, get sleep. If you're not getting sleep, you're probably going to bonk at some point in time. So all of those things, no matter what you're doing, what sport it is, all apply. It's the recovery and self-care that I think is most often neglected when we're looking at any type of goal attainment. That's a perceived outcome of some sort.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned fuel your body properly. What have you learned on your path about how to fuel your body properly, and how do you fuel your body properly today?
Well, I think when it comes to food, you have to understand what works for your body, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can fuel your body. I've never been one to diet or to try fad diets. It's just never been my thing. I've always been the type of person that loves food as well. So I like to eat a lot. And that's something that I've always because for me, when I was younger, like, I loved wrestling. So I wanted to look like China. Like, I legit wanted all the muscles you could possibly put on my body and just ramp it up. So I've never been into fad diets. Eat as healthy as you can, but in moderation as well. I think one of the things in our industry is there's this toxicity around diet and nutrition, right? Food is meant to be enjoyed, right? It's our mouth, like, is highly sensitive. I mean, that's how babies, like infants, learn what they like by putting everything in their mouth because it's highly sensitive. And yet when we become adults, we don't do that. It's like we just need to fuel our body, right? And those are terms that I've used a lot that I'm also trying to not use as much anymore, because it's not about just fueling your body. It's about being emotionally connected to your food, chewing it a lot, which, also it helps with the immune system and the gut. I eat meat, I eat vegetables, I eat fruit. I try to eat more of them as I can. I eat pizza, I eat donuts. I like all those things. I like alcohol. I love bourbon. I'm a bourbon girl, all in moderation. So I think when it comes to fueling your body, there's no one way. Like, there's no one way. It's doing what you feel is right for you. And it's also dependent on what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not running marathons anymore. So I don't need to have, the same amount of carbs and proteins and fats as I would as a runner. I'm a breastfeeding mother, so I do need to have a certain amount more calories than the average person who's not breastfeeding. But it really depends on what you're doing as well. I think a lot of people underfeed. I don't think they eat enough.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back in the story a bit, and let's talk about when you were in communications and investor relations, and how you left that safe world, which I'm sure it was. You probably had a good salary, you had benefits, and you felt a calling beyond that, and you answered it. So walk us through that process. I feel like that's where a lot of heroes get stuck on their hero's journey, and that's, they hear the call, but they stay in their comfort zone. They stay in that safety zone out of fear, generally.
For sure. Yeah, I think, it was interesting because when I was a trainer, I was working for a boutique studio. So I started in 19, I was 19. And then my first actual trainer job was 21. And then this company that I was working for at the time was 2005. And I wanted to go on a trip. And I was like, but I wanted to do some form of community work. And one of my clients at the time was working for a company, and she said, well, we've got operations in Africa if you want to go, and we've got a bunch of different philanthropic projects, one of which was called the Bridge of Hope. And so it was located in Sudan, but in Khartoum. And it was basically like a refugee camp for kids that were, because this was during the genocided force. So this is before the peace treaty was signed. And so she's like, it's safe. It's sanctioned with the UN, as safe as it can be. And I was like, oh, I would really love to do that, and be able to help where I can and support, and just be able to also just see the world differently. And so I spent just over a month in Sudan during Christmas time, which also was the Muslim Eid at that date. And it was beautiful. I taught yoga. The kids taught me how to play soccer. We did arts and crafts and some education because there was a school that was a part of that. And when I came back from that experience, it's interesting. I realized that I was like, maybe I should be doing something different with my life, other than just, being a trainer. Because originally I got into training because I wanted to become a police officer. I wanted to help my community in a different way. And I chose training because it was a very flexible career choice at the time. And then I loved it. So I stuck with it and started working with police officers in a different way, in more of a movement way. But so after Sudan, this company hired me on, and they said, well, we really need someone to be the communications bridge between our nonprofit and our for-profit. And I was like, oh, I can do that. That'd be great, because my background's in communications and business. And so I came on with them. This was 2008. 2006. And so for 2 years, I worked with them. And then this was right around the time the recession hit. So the recession hit very, very big. So I ended up losing my job because I had to be laid off. 6 months before I'd been laid off, my mom had passed tragically and suddenly. And so she had passed. I'd now lost my job, 3 months salary, which was great. And the place that I was subletting, which was a very dear friend of mine, got sold because she was trying to sell it. So now I had a huge loss, no job, and no place to live. And for 6 months, I couch surfed on people's couches. I lived in a very low cost housing unit across from strip club, which was also across from a fire station and a police station. So I felt fine. But it was on the downtown east side. And I slept on an air mattress that deflated every 48 hours that I had to blow up, like legit blow up. And that was my life for about 9 months to almost a year. And then I did odd contract work with different nonprofit organizations, because during this time, it was just really hard to get a job in anything. And that, to me, that was the 2 years of real darkness, is spending 9 months to a year not knowing where I'm going to live or what I'm going to do. And I really didn't know. And I'm like, well, what do I know that I'm really great at? Well, I'm great at motivating people. I'm also really great at training people. So maybe I should go back to that. And so I did. I ended up getting a job with a company here called Innovative Fitness, working for them for 6 months, and then reconnected with a physiotherapist who wanted to start a movement coaching side of his business. And so I then got to basically change jobs again, and then was working for 5 years with a physiotherapy clinic, and then decided that, you know what, now it's time for me to go off on my own. And so the long-winded story of your question is, between the 2 years where I was in a very dark place, to then coming into the light of having a very long time of me deciding of what am I doing in the world? Like, when you think about the hero's journey, it's like you have the call to action, but there's obstacles and adversity that you have to go through in order to reach that summit. For me, that, like, 2008 to about 2014, 15 was scaling that summit. It wasn't like a decision that I made. It was like, I was constantly, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right industry? Is this where I'm supposed to be? Always asking the big questions, because I've always been super resourceful, and I've always been able to do different things. I can do fundraising and nonprofit management. I can do communications. I can like man a coffee cart and be a barista. I can train, I can coach. And it wasn't actually until on it, John Wolf and Shane Hines, I'd known them, and they're like, hey, we want to create this durability certification. We'd love for you to create it with us. Where I was like fucking freaking out, fearful of like, can I go off on my own and do that? Because I know I can't work for this company and do that as well. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started Moveolution, the same time that I started creating that certification with On It Academy as well. And what I learned through that process was that I have all the tools I've ever needed, and all the tools that I've learned, I still have. I can pull them out whenever I want. It isn't until we actually stand on the top of that mountain and we look down and we look at where we've come from, where we actually recognize, yes, I can. And as a female, a white female in this industry, in a very white male dominated industry, has been a huge challenge for me, just because of the social conceptions and all of the societal shenanigans that come along with that. Being a woman in this industry, and being a strong presence is something that I've really wanted to work towards. And I actually had been doing that the whole time. I just hadn't recognized it until I took that next step of like getting into fear and risking it all. Because risk versus reward, right?
Mm-hmm. How did you find that faith all throughout those years from 2008 to 2014, those dark years you call them? How did you maintain that faith despite all the highs and lows that you were encountering? How did you stay strong?
I think a large part of it was, I just always trusted the process. I always, the universe always has my back. That's something I've always said. And I think from my upbringing and knowing how many challenges I did have and my mom had, that we always managed to work it out. We always managed to figure it out. And I think, coming from not having a lot as well was also part of that. It was like, I know how to survive on an air mattress. I'm totally fine with being in a low cost housing unit with someone I don't know, and getting mugged potentially because it was in a seedy area. I'm okay with all of those things because I trust the process. And I know the universe has a larger reason for all of these lessons. And it's the same thing now. And with that being said, I mean, there was moments and times where I was just like, what am I supposed to do? Well, that is actually part of the process, is asking those questions. If we already knew where we were getting to and the legacy we were going to live, then we'd never do the work to get there because we'd already know it, right? Yeah. It's all small wins. And for me, during those dark years, I was still fundraising. I was still running marathons. I was still doing all of the things that I said I would do because my word is my bond, pro and con, right? And so the faith of knowing that when I'm working towards something, I know I'm going to do it well, and I know I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, even if that is just getting through every single day until there is more light at the end of the tunnel. And those dark years, were some of the biggest lessons that carry forward into the lessons that are not the lessons, but the teachings that I'm teaching my child too.
Mm-hmm. So for that hero standing at the edge of the cliff, fearful of going all in, taking that step, what would you whisper in their ear?
Oh, just fucking do it. Just fucking do it. Like you have to. I think the thing is like fear can be your friend. If you sit and listen, if you sit and listen and you look at the face that's staring back at you. And for me, it was always the 6-year-old. It was always the 6-year-old that never felt protected. So again, tying it back into really doing that inner child work and really just looking at the past narratives that no longer serve you. What is the worst that can happen? Jobless? Sure. Can't pay my rent? Maybe, right? Those are fixable. Those are all fixable. Sitting in something that you don't feel 100% rooted in, or that you feel you have more to offer the world, and then dying on your deathbed and going back, I wish I had done that. Those are the things you never want. You have one life. So you have to figure out how you're going to live that best life, because we don't remember our past lives, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's very powerful words of advice and of wisdom. So on our journey, we meet many many mentors and many helpers. So let's take a moment to acknowledge some of the helpers and mentors that you met and that helped you on your journey. And what did you learn from them? What were your takeaways?
Man, that's a hard one. Well, I think, I think when we think about mentors, we always think about like the biggest like leaders that we've met. And I think for me, it's actually been more like my mom was a huge mentor. Like she had a lot of challenge. She had a lot of demons, a lot of skeletons in the closet. But one of the things that she always, and I don't know who the quote comes from, because I know it's not hers, but she would always say, Sarah, well-behaved women rarely ever make history. And I always love that, because then it taught me that I didn't need to be perfect. It taught me that I could fall down and get back up. It taught me that I could be crude at times. I could be bossy and bitchy. These are all things that are part of the human existence, the human experience. And watching her, really try to go through rehab a few times, really work on her stuff, taught me the idea of perseverance. Even though she's no longer here, she passed away in a fire. Unfortunately, that was an electrical malfunction, but she was super high at the time. Is that she did the best she could. And at the end of the day, we're always just doing the best that we can. And that's all that we can offer the world, really. We just have to always be growing. My husband, as well, is one of my biggest advocates, and someone who I've learned so much from, because he's the exact opposite of me. He is patient. He is super sensitive and puts his emotions all out there. And so just from having him as being a huge rock in my life, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, as I've continued to do this work, it's been the last 5 or 6 years has been some of the most influential like work and moments of my life, especially having a child and figuring out how to co-parent has been huge. As far as like leaders go, I've worked with a lot of different people. The physiotherapist I mentioned, Bernard Honorbash, he owns Fitch Train Human Performance Systems here in Vancouver, has been a wealth of knowledge. And him offering me the position of being able to come on as a movement coach and see that interdisciplinary model, and taking me under his wing was a huge stepping stone in confidence for me at a time where, I had just gotten back into the industry 6 months before that. And then having the opportunity, obviously, to work at On Academy was a massive opportunity, because there's just so many people within that spectrum, as you know, that are all leaders in what they do. And that was just a huge opportunity to be able to learn and to also deep dive into a lot of areas that were all, combining and new for all of us, in the sense of putting it out into the world and being like, hey, so here's a combined effort, here you go. Mm-hmm. Apart from, people that I like to look at knowledge from is, like Brene Brown, everybody loves her, Bruce Lee, some of the fundamentals. And I think right now, I'm just all into parenting. So it's probably going to be a different audience.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
What's your favorite parenting book or talk, or like someone that wants to delve more into parenting? Where will you send them? Whose stuff are you really into?
Conscious Kid. They're on Instagram, but Conscious Kid is an amazing resource for parenting. It's, the approach is very much natural parenting or conscious parenting. And they really deep dive into, a lot of the big questions that as a parent, some of us are afraid to ask. Like, how do I talk to my kid about anti-racism? How do I talk to my kid about stolen lands? These are the things that I'm thinking about for my white son, who is going to grow up, learning a different history and through school, because we know the schooling system is very different in how you learn it. These are things that, and also just like natural parenting in general, like if I want to homeschool, what does that look like? Because of COVID, we are considering that. That might be something, instead of putting him when we wanted to put him into early education at 3, he's going to be 3 in a couple weeks, and that's not going to happen. So there's great resources on what books to buy, different types of like, because there's no one parenting model, but just different language to use and tones and just everything that I think as a new parent, because even at 3 years, I'm still new, is trying to learn and make sure that he's emotionally regulated day to day. Because it's very, very easy to get back into the ego of like, I need to do this, or, that changes the whole energetic component. But Conscious Kid is unbelievable. And Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively love them. So they're totally vetted.
That's beautiful. Okay. So we've already talked about many of the challenges you've encountered on your journey thus far, and there's been many. But of all these challenges, what was your greatest challenge and how did you overcome it?
Oh God. Greatest challenge. In all honesty, I think the birth of my son. I think that is and not like the delivery itself, but all of what came after that. So like when it comes to like creating a life and building it in your body and then delivering it earthside into the world, there is not enough credit given to celebrating that. And not just celebrating the birth of the baby, but celebrating the birth of the mother or the parent, of that big transformation, because it's just as much of a transformation for the parents as it is for the baby that's now into the world. My pregnancy and delivery was very challenging. We had infertility issues, as I mentioned. We started as a home birth, and I had complications there and had to go to the hospital. It was beautiful, but it wasn't the birth that I thought I was going to have. And a lot of it was because I was so traumatized as a child, things would not open. So I needed help with that. And after that came postpartum depression, 17 months of chronic pain, primarily because of, you build a human in 9 months, then you fire it into the earth in like, 2 days? So, it's a very large to do. It's the biggest competition you'll ever go through. And I think from that, and just the acknowledgement of having done so much work leading up to that, and realizing that during those moments and during the time that I was delivering him and not able to deliver him the way I wanted to, I was still holding on to a lot of that control. I was still asking my question, am I going to be a good mother? Of being sexually assaulted, is everything was just too tight and just nothing was exiting. And all of that is wrapped up in trauma. So then I have 17 months of holding my son and also being in pain. And Shane talks a lot about this. So we've had conversations on that too. And then having to rebuild my body and rebuild this emotional body that is just purging all of the pent up emotions that I've held for 41 years. All came to a peak within the first year of having Leo. And, but it was a turning point, it was a pivoting point as well. And I think that is a huge thing, is when we have these challenges or moments where we think that we're hitting rock bottom, or we're like, I don't even know how I'm going to go on. It's a pivoting point. The universe is like, you're like literally knocking on the door of opportunity. And so my pivoting point there was just let all of that go and be the mother you want to be, not the mother you think you should be. And the moment that I did that, my body started to work a bit better. I still deal with persistent aches and pains, and it's been a long journey. But I would say that is one of the biggest challenges, is I've been a martyr for most of my life. I've martyred myself to a lot of different things. And the running and endurance was one of them. And I'm no longer serving that purpose. I'm not going to be a martyr to motherhood. I'm going to change that narrative, and I'm going to be a role model and a representation of what a mother, a wife, a friend, all of these things are. So my son can see the type of person that I am. And it's a back and forth. I don't have it down. I have lots of times where I martyr, and then I have to do self-check and be like, no, Sarah, you need to put yourself first. If you can't put your self first, he will not put himself first. because he's learning through that experience. And that to me has been, I would say, the biggest challenge, and it still is as an owner of a business, now as a co-owner of another business, and we're probably going to be a co-owner of another business in a little while, is trying to find that there's no such thing as balance. I always try to find balance, and balance doesn't exist. Rhythm exists. You find rhythm, you find flow, you find something that just ebbs and flows day to day, and it's probably not going to look like how you think it should look. So it's being able to navigate kind of with your eyes closed a bit, but knowing emotionally your feet are on the earth, and the universe has your back and will guide you.
Really well said. Very beautiful. So let's talk about Leo. What has being Leo's mother taught you about love?
Oh man. I would say what he's taught me the most is that like receiving love has always been hard for me. And that is the biggest one. Receiving love, giving love, love is patient. It is very, very patient. Love is, I'm totally channeling a song right now. Love is kind and caring and nurturing. Love can show up in a lot of different ways. Leo is 100% an empath. He is a very sensitive child, very, very sensitive. But he loves cuddling. He loves hugging. He loves like public displays of affection, which is something that is for me learned. It doesn't come intuitively for me. James is like that as well. So I think he gets a lot of that from his father. But I think the biggest thing is from him loving me and just being, part of me, is that I'm capable of receiving that. And that's something that is huge. I think not just from a lesson needing to be learned, but just that I think in today's world, we just need more of that. I think we give a lot and we don't allow ourselves to receive,
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned lessons. So of all the lessons, all the many, many lessons you've learned on your path, on your hero's journey, what has been your greatest life lesson learned to date that you'd like to share with the audience?
My greatest life lesson is that you can be a peaceful warrior. You don't need to go out every single day like you're going to war or you're going to battle. You don't need to draw your sword. The sword's always going to be there if you need it. But I think that's the biggest one. I think, which is another thing that I've learned just through looking at and working with Indigenous populations, is that they don't hustle. They're all about slow. They're all about longevity and taking everything in and having gratitude for everything. And so I think that is what I'm moving forward with in the world. And I'm not moving forward with my with the sword drawn and the fists clenched anymore. I think we can do all the things we want to do and we can be warriors. We don't need to do it from a place of channeling the Mars energy. I think we need to channel the Venus more and be able to move through the world as a warrior with an open heart.
Wow, that is very profound, and that's something that I would love to channel a bit more, that peaceful warrior myself. So to close all interviews, we ask a couple of final questions that we ask to everyone, and then we'll close just kind of with what do you have on the horizon. We'll talk a bit about Kit's Beach Coffee and just the projects you have, and a third co-owned business you said might be coming up. But let's get to those final two questions. Mm-hmm. So the first one is in 3 words or less, or a phrase. How will you describe your experience you are having on this earth?
Profound and powerful.
Profound and powerful. Mm-hmm. All right. And on to the next one. So I know that we are all powerful beings and we are capable of magic. And I'm going to use a little bit of my magic and I'm going to transport us into the future. I'm going to transport us into the future where we're alongside the 85-year-old Sarah Jamieson. And I want you to close your eyes and I want you to picture this 85-year-old Sarah. What does life look like for her? What is the legacy that you have left behind?
Oh, man. Okay. Well, 85, I'm retired, which means I'm sitting in a cabin in the woods somewhere, probably near a lake, and surrounded by my husband, who of course will still be there because I'm older, so he's younger. With my son and my grandkids, if he chooses to have them. The legacy that I would say that I have left behind, God, is just that it's funny when we think of legacy because we think of it in terms of like a business or like these monetary huge things. When I envision being 85 and just sitting with him and hanging out, you know, cabin side, is him having moved through life without fear. And what I mean by that is not fear of like taking the risks. However he chooses to live his life, just not living it in fear and living it for a greater purpose. And same for me at 85, having, you know, educated and supported and facilitated a movement that is deeply rooted in healing and recovery, and for people to face their traumas in a sense that makes them feel stronger in the world. I think that's where so if I were to just not wake up the next morning, those things would make me happy.
Beautiful. I want you to picture this. I want you to picture this 85-year-old in your head, because I'm not going to leave us hanging in the future. I'm going to bring us back to the right here and now, where all the sweetness lies. And this 85-year-old Sarah sends you a message. What does she send you?
Oh, man. Just keep trusting the process. Just have faith in the process.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So where can people find you? They can take your daily durability program at Moveolution.com. That's been a huge help for many during this COVID situation where a lot of people are having to work from home. Just I'll give you just like the floor to speak where people can connect with you.
For sure. Yeah. So at Moveolution is my Instagram handle. Moveolution.com is obviously my website. That's the easiest place to find me. The things that I'm doing right now is totally promoting, you know, more movement, getting, you know, moving the joints. Daily durability is a big part of that. And it's a good starting place because there's over 70 videos that you can just have lifetime access to and not have to worry about anything. You just follow along. But there's lots of free resources on there as well. I've been starting, you know, a webinar series looking at, you know, working with a painful mover because I feel from a training perspective, we need more of that in our world. There's lots of ways to kind of learn or work with me. You know, from being a parent and doing this stuff is I try to offer as much value add as I can when it comes to both moving for daily life, moving for training, and then moving through parenthood. And so those are kind of the three kind of pillars that that I'm embodying with Moveolution as a business right now.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about Kids Beach Coffee. It was your first season this year.
Sure.
Where did that come from? And tell us about your passion for coffee and that whole business of yours.
Oh yeah. So my husband and I are total coffee snobs. Now I was never a coffee snob. He made me a coffee snob. But we ended up going to San Francisco one time and walking into Blue Bottle and just absolutely loving their coffee. And I think that's where it kind of started, where I was like, oh man, and all these independent coffee shops started, you know, popping up, you know, a few years ago. And we just really loved it. And so we started making coffee at home. We use different, you know, we would use a Hario. We've got a hand grinder. We've got all the fancy pants tools at Chemex and all this stuff. And it's been a lot of fun. And what it's actually turned into has been, like, for me, a meditative process in the morning, because it makes me slow down to actually take more time to grind the beans, you know, do all the things. And around earlier last year we were having some conversations actually about starting a beer company, and with a couple buddies of his. And then we knew that was going to take a longer time frame, and then COVID hit. And then I was like, let's do coffee. Let's do coffee. Like, we want to create community. We want to create something that's sustainable. We don't want a brick and mortar. So we're like, okay, well, let's do coffee. And so we created Kit's Coffee Company. And James is, the man of the show. He's the brewmaster, and I work all the sustainability. And so for me, what I wanted to do was create a business that was, again, that mission statement of creating greater community and also engaging and financially contributing to that community. So the sustainability pillar, it really ties in beach and ocean conservation, because we're working on the beach. We live and we play here. And then also language revitalization for Indigenous populations, Squamish Nation. And because language is such a huge part of the elder wisdom and tying in history and culture and all of that, is we really wanted to give back to the people that have tended these lands for centuries. And that really is a huge pivoting point for me, because I love to be able to create community engagement, especially with small businesses. And so we basically created it. We had to wait until August to open. So we're actually only open 31 days, because we're open Thursday to Sunday. But we ended up raising $4,000, because we created this donation matching program where instead of tips, you could just tip a donation, and that donation would wholly get used and then matched by us, matched by our other companies, Moveolution. And my husband's a business coach as well. So he works with startups. So jamesthecoach.com, own your shit, great book, totally plugging it. And so it was great. We were able to create this amazing, really community centered initiative, and it worked. We have so many people that are coming out. It's great coffee as well. We've connected with a lot of different coffee companies here. And we also focused on cold brew and then popsicles. One of my clients is a chef. And so we were like, popsicles, that sounds so cool. So we did coffee popsicles and kid popsicles, and we're going to do the same thing next year. We'll be open out from March to October. But my husband loves to create businesses. He's been doing that since he was like 14. And it's nice to be able to diversify your portfolio. As a business owner, I think I've never believed that you have one career, and I've never believed that you only do one thing in the world. So it's nice to be able to do something with him. And then, yeah, we're going to have Kit's Beach Brewing. That's going to be popping up probably in the spring.
That's very exciting. One last thing before I let you go. You've talked about community so many times throughout this podcast, throughout this episode, and in today's COVID world, that's something that people are really lacking. So for those listening who are feeling that lack of community, that lack of collectiveness, that union with all right now, what's your suggestion? How can we form community in this odd time?
That's a great question, because I think the reality that we all need to come to terms with is that COVID isn't going anywhere. So many people talk about the post-COVID and, when are things going to get back to normal? There isn't. The flu that we have now was the Spanish flu in the 1500s. It morphed and mutated, and this is what we have. COVID is going to be the same, which is, somewhat aligned with SARS, right? That came, but didn't make it globally, which was great, but this has. So what we have to be prepared for is to do community differently, and to do it in a way that's innovative, that's resourceful, that may not look the way it does now, because now when we think about engaging with community, is because we can't do that person to person the same way, is that we've gone online, we've gone to Zoom, we've gone to, different types of live streaming, and all of those things are great. I think the beauty of being able to turn things virtual and remote is that people have more access to different agencies and communities. And that, I think, is super, super important, is to have different types of communities and agencies that you can connect with if you are starting to feel that you are disconnected and distanced. It's a very different style and experience, but it's something. And, in person stuff can still happen. Go outside. Have small groups, just do it safely. But what I really want to promote is that we have to continue to do something, because this isn't changing. This isn't changing. COVID is here to stay. So we have to figure out ways to make sure that our emotional, mental, and connected needs are met in any way that is comfortable to us. But just know, to anyone that is listening, if you are feeling disconnected, if you are feeling isolated, know that you are not, that there are people here, that you are not alone. And there are lots of resources to be able to help create that greater community together. For me, what I found, because also my husband does all of the errands, so I haven't gone grocery shopping in 6 months. We're trying to keep low risk. So for me, I have to get outdoors at least once a day. And then I have a couple communities that are really close to my heart. I have a virtual moon circle that I do through Moon Tent. And we get astrology and we get like new moon prompts. And Susan Lipschitz, who's the astrologer, is just absolutely amazing. And then building allyship with Dr. J-Pop, which is an anti-racism, how to be a better ally, has been phenomenal, because I'm having conversations I normally have in person with people, but I don't have that opportunity. And I get to meet people all over the world, which I think is just so cool to learn from different cultures and traditions and just different beliefs. So yeah, communities are out there. You just might have to hunt for them.
They're there. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate your time. It's been a beautiful opportunity to connect with you. You in BC, me in Manitoba, connecting with this new digital world. So to close all podcasts, we bring our fist and we take it in for digital fist bump.
Hey.
Boom. Welcome to the winner's circle. Thank you so much. And we'll chat again soon.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.